Say the vat is good. The vat is good. Kiss the vat.
Okay, show of hands. Who thought when the episode first started and with that title card that this entire episode would take place with Rick and Morty in a vat of acid waiting around? Because I did. Ah well, let's jump into the 8th episode of the season with the Vat of Acid episode. We get a surprising amount of growth from Morty this episode. Not only is he more confident with Rick at the beginning of the episode, which we've seen as a growing theme throughout the seasons, but he's even ready to directly challenge Rick. Of course, when you challenge a mad genius asshole like Rick, I don't think there's really ever any winning. For the first time ever, we see Morty in his full capacity, not when his good and bad sides are separated, actually growing past Jessica. We see him getting a real girlfriend, go through both its ups and downs, and seemingly fall in love, then losing it all. All of this helping him to evolve, grow more understanding, and for once actually not care about Jessica, be more honest with her, and overall less nervous and more confident around her, which of course makes him more attractive to her.
Oh, hi, Jessica. Hey, I'm sorry I brushed you off the other day. I was just trying to be cool.
Oh, I don't even know what you're talking about.
And I know that the theme of this season seems to be that nothing is canon, and everything that they're doing now is just for fun and supposed to be back like season 1, but I really hope that Morty's emotional growth at least sticks around, because I really like that part. Of course, considering that technically every interaction Morty had with Jessica wasn't in his dimension, that means all of this probably didn't actually mean anything. Rewinding the episode to the beginning, the Vat of Acid is a reference and parody to the frequent use of it to kill people in shows and comics of the 80s, such as Batman.
And we were talking about what a staple vats of toxic waste were in the 80s. And Brandon Johnson, who plays Golden Fold, made the observation that it's just good for production value. Like, as if that's why so many people died in vats of acid in the 80s is because it was an easy way to kill people cinematically.
Notably, we get a title card with the name of the episode, and to my knowledge, this is the first time this has ever happened, unless you count the alternate title sequence for Tales from the Citadel. For me, this helps seal the idea that the entire episode would take place in the Vat of Acid, so perhaps that's why this was done. The crystals being exchanged look exactly like rupees from the Legend of Zelda franchise. After the hilarious Vat of Acid intro, Rick and Morty argue about how good of an idea the fake Vat of Acid was when Rick brings up both the time he turned himself into a pickle from Season 3's Pickle Rick and the time Morty wanted a dragon earlier this very season during his 4th episode, Claw and Hoarder Special Victims Morty, which, to my personal opinion, was one of the weakest episodes of the entire show. Yes, I know, having a personal opinion pisses some people off. If you love the episode, that's fine.
What's that cool thing you did without me again? The awesome thing? I guess you wanted a dragon? Unforgettable. God.
It wasn't good. Oh, whatever.
Big lonely drunk. Save some of these atomic age beatnik zingers for your English homework, Bukowski.
This is a reference to Charles Bukowski, a German-American poet and short story writer whose work was considered controversial for its time, and whose work has influenced several musical artists such as the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fall Out Boy, Arctic Monkeys, and Modest Mouse, who even had a song titled Bukowski. Morty repitches to Rick that Rick invents a video game save point device where you can travel back in time to wherever you saved your game, or life, just like in a video game.
Yes, Morty, I saw it on Futurama. Oh, so you don't do anything unless it's original.
So here we get a meta joke about writing an episode, and likely something straight from the writer's room about if an idea is worth doing if it isn't original, especially as Rick and Morty is a sci-fi show and will be compared to other sci-fi shows like Futurama. Meanwhile, the episode of Futurama that they're referring to is the series finale of Futurama, unless it magically gets renewed after being cancelled. Yet again. Meanwhile, in this episode, Professor Farnsworth invents a time button, which allows one to go back 10 seconds in time. It's a little different, as you're just going back in time in the Futurama version, and in Futurama the device is used for personal gain as opposed to screwing around. Morty, on the other hand, thinks he tricks Rick into making the device, and at first mostly uses it as a chance to essentially do GTA in real life, going absolutely wild. Like playing a video game and using the real-life save state to do essentially what most games can do, or at least a save state mod could already do. During this montage, Morty both shoves an elderly man in a wheelchair and helps him across the street. Behind them is a tavern that looks like Moe's Tavern from The Simpsons thanks to its notable windows. Morty also tries a number of ice cream flavors, with the flavors listed being named after the various background designers from the show. This all leads to the extremely random Morty love story that honestly took me completely by surprise. According to the episode's director, Jacob Hare, the plane crash portion of this sequence was a reference to the 1974 book Alive, the Story of the Andes Survivors.
They said kind of go nuts, and I read that book Alive in middle school. It may have traumatized me as a kid.
This book documents the real-life events of the survivors of the real-life Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, which crashed in the Andes Mountains in 1972. Just like in Rick and Morty, the survivors ran out of food and actually had to eat the frozen remains of those who died from the crash in order to survive. There was also a 1993 film, Alive, based on the book, which is where the majority of this footage is coming from. After Jerry accidentally screws Morty and sends him back to his save point before meeting his girlfriend, Rick finally reveals to Morty the true consequences of the Morty save device. Firstly, there's a reference to the device using a time crystal, which Rick used in his device to stop time in the finale of Season 1, Ricksy Business, and of course got in trouble with Shalimi Pants the Time Cop for in Season 2's A Wrinkle in Time.
You see, Morty, you weren't saving your place and going back. I don't respect time travel. If Ant-Man and the Wasp can do it, I'm not interested.
This may be a reference to the use of time travel in the MCU, when the Avengers followed Ant-Man's advice to use properties of the quantum realm to create a quantum tunnel to pull off a time heist in the Avengers Endgame.
It wasn't so much a do-over as it was isolating a moment in time, splitting your probable selves, and shunting you into a near-duplicate, equally probable reality, transporting you into it at the moment of parallel determination.
All of Rick's explanation here is essentially the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. If you recall Schrodinger's cat, which Rick and Morty references in A Wrinkle in Time, this all deals with quantum superpositions where multiple states can exist at once. And you'll have to excuse me here, as I'm by no means an expert on this. I've done some cursory research on my own just out of personal interest, but there's no way I'd have time to do enough research on this particular topic in order to get this breakdown out in time. But going back to many worlds interpretation, this is one possible solution to Schrodinger's cat and how the universe could potentially work. A deterministic approach to the universe says that there is no free will and every single thing happens for a determined reason. You're watching this video right now because you wanted more Rick and Morty content. Therefore, there's an audience for it. Therefore, I'm making a breakdown of Rick and Morty. Therefore, I'm currently breaking down determinism. Therefore, I'm on camera at this moment because I thought it might be more engaging. Every single thing in the universe can be broken down like this to an atomic level, according to determinism. The show Devs has a great breakdown of these concepts, which was also a great show that our very own Meg and Mike happened to break down. However, if my understanding is correct, quantum superpositions throw a wrench in this, as they are truly random, and if that's the case, there is free will. However, many worlds' interpretation is the belief that determinism does exist, and so too do superpositions. All this plays out in an infinite number of realities, each with every single possible quantum superposition playing out, and every reality being a different branch of this, hence many worlds. Many worlds would of course be fitting for Rick and Morty in general, as the whole show centers around the idea of an infinite number of parallel universes. Hopefully I did a decent job explaining this. If I made a mistake, feel free to correct me in the comments, as like I said, I'm not an expert and I do find it all interesting.
The only real hitch is that there was already a U in each probable dimension, so we had to solve for that. That's right, you little bitch. It's the prestige. You prestige yourself.
How many did I
You
kill?
tell me, Morty.
If you don't get this reference, I'm going to say skip ahead to the timecode below, as it's referencing the film The Prestige, which is an absolutely amazing Christopher Nolan film that you 100% should watch if you haven't seen it yet. And this is about to be a massive, massive spoiler to the film. Okay, you still with me? Cool. In The Prestige, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale's characters are battling magicians, and Christian Bale's character invents a teleporting trick that, no matter how hard he tries, Hugh Jackman simply cannot figure out. Hugh Jackman ends up obtaining a cloning machine developed by Tesla, not the car company, which he uses to create a similar trick. Jackman develops a teleporting man trick using the cloning device, however, one of the clones always dies, no matter what, as part of the trick. So ultimately, only one Hugh Jackman always survives. The creepy part is, Hugh Jackman doesn't know who the clone is, so he could potentially be committing suicide every single time he performs the trick. Well, that was certainly a major spoiler for a film that you've hopefully already seen, and if you haven't seen it, welcome back. Good to see you again. Good job on clicking on the correct time code.
I don't deserve this. I was just having fun. So was Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer was a Wisconsin serial killer who was captured in the early 90s and whose crimes included murder, necrophilia, and cannibalism. Really, the true deal of an absolute garbage person.
What? What is this? Wow, it's like a SWAT team, some drug dealers, some grassroots Me Too activists, the ACLU, Jesus, Morty, the AARP. I don't want to talk about it. The NAACP, Gamergate. Morty, is that Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor?
The Me Too activists would imply Morty committed some sort of sexual harassment. The ACLU is the American Civil Liberties Union, which honestly could mean Morty did any number of things, as they're a general human rights group. The AARP was known as American Association of Retired Persons, likely due to Morty screwing with the elderly person trying to cross the road. The NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, implying Morty did something racist. Perhaps what he did to Mr. Goldenfold would count here. Gamergate was a hodgepodge of gamers angry about different things, so here would probably imply they're angry Morty used his time-save device on a video game essentially as save states. Justice Sonia Sotomayor is a more liberal-leaning Supreme Court justice nominated by Obama in 2009. I'm not sure what Morty did to personally offend her, but I'm going to go with the general human rights violations on this one.
What do I do? Well, I'm stumped. Seems like there's no way out of this one. Unless... God damn it. Yeah.
I have nothing to break down here. I just wanted to repeat this moment because it was so good and made me laugh out loud.
Though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy.
Merchant of Venice, nice.
This one's pretty self-explanatory, but this is a direct quote from Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. The ending stinger is, of course, the Johnny Carson Show, with the welcome back title card mimicking the style of Johnny Carson's various title cards during his Tonight Show run. But that wraps up everything I've got for this episode of Rick and Morty. It was probably the episode I laughed the most from this season, and I'd love to know what your thoughts were. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.